Hello, welcome to Psych lecture number 2 on developmental psychology. These are going to be our learning targets for today. We're going to mainly be looking at parent involvement and parent involvement in terms of attachment and different parenting styles and how that affects children and their social development and psychologically. So the majority of this lecture is going to be on Module 48. I will hit a little bit on Module 49, but this is a very important unit or module for you to understand, so make sure you watch the lecture and do the reading. Okay, here's our first question for today. Daycare and attachment. A little different than what we use in Hong Kong, as we have domestic helpers, but I want you to think about this and how there are negative and positive effects to children's attachment in relation to daycare and domestic helpers. So you go ahead, pause me. I'm going to go to the next slide and begin our lecture right here. Okay, so looking at the origins of attachment, Harry Harlow, one of the first men to really bring some objective science to understanding what humans and animals do in times of distress. So previous theories kind of told us more so that attachment had to do more with nourishment instead of physical contact. However, Harry Harlow and his wife wanted to look at the science of love more so. And what he did in this experiment was he took two surrogate mothers, okay, as you can see there in findings. One of the monkeys one of the surrogate mothers had a soft terry cloth. The other monkey was made of wood and hard wire. However, it had nourishment. So one had nourishment and one had comfort. And what he found was that when put in these situations of stress, the monkey tend to show a sense of attachment or emotional tie with the surrogate mother that had the soft terry cloth rather than the mother who actually nourished the monkey. So the conclusion here is just that physical touch of a parent or a caregiver, whether it's humans or animals, does play a major role in the development of a child, both physically and psychologically. So here you can see in these images, some of the experiment that took place in the 1970s with Harry Harlow. Up here, you can see the two different surrogate mothers. Right, the one on the right is the soft cloth, and then this one over here is the nourishing mother. So even when the monkey's feeding, you can see in this image that he still clings to the surrogate mother of the soft cloth. And down here in the picture, you can see, Harry Harlow was not one of the most ethical individuals in terms of his experiments. Actually, it's probably one of the least ethical animal experiments in history. And these monkeys, were maternally deprivated and socially isolated for about 15 years, which a lot of his research further supported the importance of making the Animal Liberation Act, which came later. I'm going to post this video here for you on the document, on the Google Doc, and you can kind of see what happened in that laboratory. But it's about attachment, and it really shows the science of love and how if at the right time in our lives that amount of maternal care is given accordingly during those crucial periods in our human development and our social development, we can end up very well off. However, if we don't have that maternal care during those periods of human development, we can have a lot of psychological and physical developmental issues socially. Okay, next I want to talk about Mary Ainsworth and her contributions to attachment. So Mary Ainsworth studied attachment differences by looking at mother and infants and their relationships during a strange situation. Okay, and by strange situation, this is just referring to the fact that it was done in a laboratory, right? So Ainsworth wanted to understand the attachment bond of how can we objectively measure secure attachment, and how can we objectively measure insecure attachment. And so what she did here was, in her experiment, she looked at sensitive responsive mothers and insensitive responsive mothers. All right. So a child and a caregiver are placed in a room, right, in this lab, okay, and the child explores the room while the mother observes and watches the child. Okay. Shortly after, the mother still in the room, a stranger walks in and begins to converse with the mother. Then the mother leaves and exits the room, okay, and says goodbye to the child. Eventually, maybe after so many minutes, the mother comes back and embraces that child. This is then repeated over and over, while that period of waiting for the mother to return continues to increase. And there were three things that Mary Ainsworth was recording in terms of this child's behavior. So the first one was the amount of exploration. So when the mom left, how did that child explore the environment? Did he play with the toys? Did he engage with the environment? Number two, the child's reaction at the mother's departure. Was he in great distress? Did he not really care? Was he relaxed? Number three, the child's reaction to the return of his caregiver. Right? So when the mom came back to embrace him, how did that child respond? So here's what she found in her research. This sample, by the way, was generalized to represent the U.S. population. So 65% of that population is believed to have some sort of trust in his or her needs being met from their caregiver. And some of the signs is this. In a secure attachment, you will see a sense of distress when the mother leaves. This is normal. This is completely normal if the child shows some anxiety when their mother leaves the room. Number two, they're going to generally explore the environment if they have a secure attachment. It may take some time. They might not do it right away, but eventually that child will tend to explore the room and engage with whatever is in that room, whether it's other children or other toys or another adult in the room. And then lastly, when the mother returns, that child will generally be responsive and greet the mother or the father when they return. Okay, in adult life, this is generally going to show secure relationships, going to be able to seek and have a good relationship with a partner. You'll also be comfortable in your relationships. Granted, we all have our insecurities. Next one is avoidant. Okay, this we see in about 25% of the population, where they're subconsciously believing that his or her needs may or may not be met. So it does fall under insecure attachment, which is what you really need to understand. What does secure attachment look like? What does insecure attachment look like? So here, the child, again, is going to show distress when the mother leaves. They will tend to focus somewhat on exploring the environment, but the major factor that you're going to see a difference in is when the mother returns. They're not going to show a lot of engagement. And then lastly, we have ambivalent or resistant. This is the most severe. You're going to see this in about 10% of cases, where that child really cannot rely on their caregivers to meet their needs. And in this case, you're going to see a child being very upset, very clingy and dramatic when their mother departs, and then they will not explore the room or the environment at all, have no interest in it. And also, you're going to see that the child's very resistant and aggressive when that mother returns. This is going to lead to an adult life of intense fear of rejection, very unstable and insecure relationships, very clingy. One important thing to remember here, though, amidst all of this attachment theory and these examples of what secure looks like and what insecure looks like, is that children are usually pretty distressed when their parents leave them at a young age. And this is not a sign of weak attachment or bad parenting. So how infants behave, However, when their parents are absent for long periods of time over a consistent basis, and also how they react when their parents return, these are things we actually need to be mindful of and really observing. But don't overthink it. You're not you're not a doctor in psychology, so don't be judging people's parenting skills just off of a few reactions that you see. So be very careful. This is a sensitive topic. So how does temperament impact parenting and attachment? We've been talking a lot about attachment. So what are some other factors that may affect that? And that would be temperament, right? So research shows us that while, yes, attachment is very nurture-based, it's also influenced by our genetics. And what is genetic? Your temperament. Your temperament is genetic. This, in turn, is going to affect the parenting, and it's going to affect the attachment between the child and the parent. So, it's not as easy as it sounds sometimes. It doesn't mean you're a bad parent. Sometimes that attachment looks insecure because of the child's temperament, and it can be very difficult, right? So there are a lot of different variables at stake rather than just that parent is nurturing. There are other things. So temperament is relating to the measure of the child's activity level, the sociability, and the emotionality of that child, right? Shortly after birth, this is when you see a child's temperament. It's either difficult, irritable, intense, and unpredictable in terms of feeding schedules and sleeping schedules. Or it's an easy temperament where that child is cheerful, relaxed, feeding and sleeping is generally pretty predictable, or it's in the middle. So you want to have easy, right, as you have kids, but that's not how it always works. So this explains why parenting oftentimes can correlate with the child's behavior and their attachment. And it can partly be because of the child's difficult temperaments. This can in turn elicit and react more intensely to negative parenting, which no parent parents perfectly. And so an instant of negative parenting can have this serious issue on a child because of his temperament. So just something to keep in mind. Okay, next I want to look at Diana Baumond and her research on parenting styles, in which she tried to also modify and gives a better understanding of temperament of children. And so she classified parenting styles into 3 specific categories. The first is authoritarian, second is authoritative, and the last is permissive. Ways to remember these. Authoritarian and authoritative are different. Authoritative is good, authoritarian is not good. But if you look at the end there, iv means give. Okay, so authoritarian, you're giving still in that relationship. You're still giving a sense of warmth. So let's look at the characteristics of these more specifically. Authoritarian, parents impose very strict rules. It's very rigid, dictatorial, and they expect constant obedience. Okay, therefore it leads to strict punishment if you don't obey. Right? There's not a lot of communication here. It's my way or the highway. It's not healthy. It's really unhealthy for the child. And you see this in the workplace as well. And therefore, when you're raised in this way, you don't know how to communicate when you're having a problem. You don't know how to communicate when you're frustrated. You don't know how to communicate, right? And so this can cause very moody, very aggressive behaviors. You'll very much lack that ability to communicate with those around you, whether it's your friends, whether it's your family, whether it's your coworkers. You'll just have a very difficult time, and you may be very rash in the way that you behave. Okay. Next, we have permissiveness. So permissive parents set very few rules. They allow their children to kind of rule the household and set their own demands, set their own laws, and there's really little punishment or punishment or reinforcement that comes with poor behavior and not meeting the rules and the expectations of the household. And so future outcome here is going to be children being very impulsive, very immature, and they will oftentimes fail to understand the sense of respect, especially towards authority figures. Okay, which this is going to be very detrimental to the child when they go out and try to get a job, and then they have an authority figure like a boss or a manager over them, and they won't know and understand how to respond in that situation because their parents were very permissive. Lastly, we have authoritative. Okay, this is healthy in the sense that the parents, yes, they're still demanding and they're still strict, but they're reasonable. They have reasonable demands. They still insist, however, that you obey the house rules. Okay, but there's a sense of warmth still as they explain those rules to you, as they explain those expectations, and they enforce them. Right? This is going to lead to a much more healthy adult life. You're going to be very more well-adjusted, goal-oriented, socially competent in your professional life and in your social life, right, outside of work. So if you look at this chart, you can see these three categories and kind of where they fall in terms of what's being measured. So, right, you've got low responsiveness, high responsiveness or supportiveness. You've got low demand, and then you've got high demand. Right, authoritative is going to fall right in the sweet spot. You've got equal amount of control and demand, but also a sense of support and warmth. Right, permissive, you've got warmth, you got supportiveness, but you have no lack of demand or control. So you become just completely out of whack. And then authoritarian is the opposite, right? You've got way too much control, way too much demand, zero warmth, zero support. So I want you to go ahead, think about this question. What would you answer in terms of Keisha and Jasmine? Describe their parents' reactions in terms of a permissive and an authoritative context. So go ahead, write that down now. Okay, we're going to briefly discuss gender and development real quick here. Just want to hit on some of these terms. What's the difference between gender and sex? Well, sex strictly is talking about biological aspects, the biological traits that make us male and female. Gender is looking at both biological and social characteristics when discussing what makes us male, what makes us female, in terms of how we use that term versus gender and sex. There is different context of how we should use those in the English language. As humans, we like to organize, right? This is what we do. We like to categorize things. Naturally, when somebody's born, what's the first question we ask? Well, what is it? Boy, girl, what do you have? You know, we want to know that because it makes things simpler for us, and then we can move into our expectations, right? And that first expectation is that term gender roles. All right, role is just any kind of expectation we have about a social position, about how people ought to act, and so we have these expected behaviors for males and females. Gender identity, this is more personal within the sense of being female or male. Man, a lot of people struggle with this today, especially. It's a very serious issue throughout the world. And not knowing what your gender is, not knowing your identity, that's a scary thing. And so those who are struggling with that, you know, like we want to be supportive towards them and we want to help them through that because identity is important. There are two genders, male and female, and that's it. And a lot of people don't have that truth. And so we want to be supportive of that, and we don't want to shut them out if they're struggling with that, just as if anybody was struggling with any other issue. We want to be supportive of them, okay? Next we have social learning theory. Social learning theory, we're just talking about learning through observation, right? We learn to imitate by being rewarded or punished for certain behaviors. So as a boy, I'm expected to behave this way. As a girl, I'm expected to behave this way. And so I learn through observational learning how I'm supposed to act according to my gender. And this is wrong in some ways because, you know, we type so much. We type things. And then that kind of goes into the next one, gender typing, right? The way that some children are more attuned than others to certain roles we take all these different items like clothes, colors, different activities, and we type them as boy or girl. Okay, and then lastly we have gender schema, a person's understanding of a gender based on past processes of assimilation, accommodation, which then further shapes our expectations of what our behavior should be like and what our image should be like, right? So we talked, well, last chapter you read about accommodation, you read about assimilation, and that whole process of developing these schemas, right? So I want you to look at these pictures, right? I mean, this right here is a prime example of gender typing. This one's okay. This one's, I'd say that's kind of neutral. I mean, that's definitely not neutral. That's gender typing. That is definitely not a neutral toy. That's also gender typing. Pretty, what do you think? That's definitely not gender neutral. Okay, so go ahead, answer this question. Pause me. Okay, I'm going to answer. Hopefully you pause me and you answer the question. The correct answer here would be gender expression. All right, and the reason for that would be because you're talking about external showing of gender. I didn't actually tell you gender expression in that last slide, but I wanted to see if you could get it. So gender expression, we're looking at a person's external showing of the gender. Gender typing, we're looking at the process of acquiring a gender or identity based on certain things like you need to wear blue, you need to play with dolls, right? You need to play with red cars. Gender schema, this is our understanding of gender and our expected behaviors and roles. So they're all kind of a little confusing, but that's that. So this is the end of the lecture. I'll post another one again soon. All right, guys. Take care.